Naruto is a series that has been, and unless something really captivates my heart, will likely always be my favorite series. But just like every other series, as a superfan, I'm going to pick out discrepancies, compare later conversations with information given to us at the beginning of the series, and ultimately we'll end up with questions that I just can't seem to make sense of. And again, this is my favorite series, but I can recognize when the author of the series has a bit of inconsistency with world building and building upon previous plot points. And to me, it seems like Kishimoto had a bit of tunnel vision when making his work. Instead of trying to flesh out everything he possibly could, and therefore dragging the series out several years later, like One Piece for example, he decided to beeline for what he wanted to write, which was a story about brotherhood and friendship. So today, let's take a look at 5 questions in Naruto and Naruto Shippuden that just don't seem to make any sense, or at the very least, are questions that should have been expanded upon. And if you can think of answers to these questions, please let me know down in the comment section below. Starting off with a question that has a few possible explanations, we have Lee passing the academy exams when he was a kid. As we all know, all children in the Leaf Village that wish to become a ninja must pass a required amount of skill checks and tests before they're given the rank of Genin and assigned to a 4-man team under a Jonin. As we saw with Naruto, he was unable to pass the test because of his inability to perform the clone jutsu. This of course was later rectified when he stole a forbidden scroll and somehow managed to learn a jutsu that was 1,000 times better than the one he previously failed at. Also, can we take a second to marvel at how good of a teacher the second Hokage must be? Think about it, Naruto couldn't perform the clone jutsu, and we know that Naruto doesn't really like reading or doing schoolwork in general, so for him to not only be able to read, but comprehend what the scroll is saying, and then perform the technique that is magnitudes better than the one he failed at previously the same day, is a huge testament to how well the scroll lays out information on the technique. Anyway, back to Lee. We don't have any actual text saying how he passed, and in fact, all we can really infer is that Guy had something to do with it. During the fight between Lee and Gaara, we're given a flashback of Lee in his elementary school days, and the kids around him are teasing him how he can't perform ninjutsu or genjutsu, and notably, him having poor taijutsu is also mentioned. But in both the manga and the anime, it is shown that Guy is watching this encounter and takes a special interest into Lee. The only logical conclusion I can come up to is that either Guy made a special request for Lee to be on his team, and knowing his attitude, the third Hokage really couldn't calm him down or change his mind, or the test for Lee's class at the academy happened to be changed to taijutsu, and by that point Lee had improved. Either way, the fact that Lee is a ninja doesn't make too much sense, but I'm glad that he is because I love what interactions we do get with Lee. All the way from OG Naruto, one of my favorite fights and one of the bigger plot points of the original series was Orochimaru losing his arms to the third Hokage's Reaper Death Seal. This was such an awesome and emotional moment because before the retcon of his character, the third Hokage was a pretty likable person for the most part who genuinely loved and wanted to protect his village, doing so against not just an opponent, but his previous student who he raised, cultivated, and likely loved like an actual child of his own to some extent. But as we all know, the old man's age finally caught up to him in this fight, and Hiruzen dies a hero. But not without taking something precious from Orochimaru first, and that's his ability to weave hand signs. Doing this in a time where most, if not all of the jutsu required some kind of hand signs was massive and crippled Orochimaru substantially. But we're shown much later on that Orochimaru had a pretty easy answer to this kind of all along. In the Uzumaki Hall, right outside of Konoha, is a wall of masks displayed that allow the user to have the Death Reaper take over the body as a human sacrifice to perform the jutsu. Orochimaru is shown using the mask, getting the ability to use his arms after all this time, and then jumping into another body as his old one was being used as the sacrifice. If Orochimaru knew about this, why didn't he do it long ago? Getting his arms back seemed like the biggest priority until his eyes became fixated on Sasuke. We know that he can only do the body transfer jutsu once every few years, so it makes sense why he didn't possess someone over Sasuke, but still yet, if he was able to get his arms back at any point, that would be much more preferable. We're not given an explanation as to how or even when Orochimaru found this information out, but he did. The only answer that is obvious to me is Kishimoto hadn't thought of this location yet and therefore just placed it into the story when it was necessary. Something like this could have been amazing world building, especially if it's something like Kakashi showing this place to Naruto would have happened, but instead, it's just a one-off location that never gets visited again. Look, memes aside, I do really like Sakura as a character. I think she's a great supporting role, causes tension in places where it's needed amongst teenagers who have a lot of emotions, and overall has a pretty likable personality. But one thing I was always interested in the fact that from the beginning, Sakura supposedly had a great prowess for genjutsu, both being able to combat against it and recognize it in general, I suppose. And after Sasuke awakened his Sharingan against Haku, I really thought the trajectory of the team was Sakura using her genjutsu knowledge and prowess to help Sasuke develop his abilities, while Kakashi would have taken an extra interest in training Naruto after seeing his tailed beast chakra on the bridge. But instead, we kinda received nothing from Sakura. We have a short little moment where genjutsu is used in the preliminary rounds to the Chunin exams, but Sasuke is the one who catches it. He just mentions that Sakura also should have seen it, and only after this does she chime in and say something about it, clearly showing that Sasuke noticed it before her and it potentially going over her head in the first place. After this, the only real-time Sakura encounters genjutsu of any kind is when facing off against the Itachi clone, but that scene was lent towards Naruto, of course, so it's assumed that Sakura really had no issues. It would have been cool if Sasori's poison had also had an effect that causes genjutsu to some extent, and Sakura would have had to use her expertise to help Chiyo figure out what's real and what's illusion during their fight, but all we really have are a few short showings of Sakura being able to resist genjutsu, and that's about it. Honestly, I think this just falls to Sakura not having a high popularity among fans, and so I'd imagine Kishimoto wasn't motivated to write for a character that no one really cared about. If Sakura would have had a few more interactions, maybe things would be different, but for now, I think associating Sakura with genjutsu should be more of an afterthought than anything. Also, side note, let's stop saying Sakura scales to Kaguya just because she got a sneak hit on her. You could replace Sakura with just about any ninja in that circumstance and they would quote-unquote scale to Kaguya if they too would have been able to hit her, so I don't think Sakura scales is entirely accurate. Sakura's strong, but not that strong. She's strong though. To me, this is one of the most blatant moments of Kishimoto writing something into a story without realizing the ramifications of world building. After the death of the third Hokage at the hands of Orochimaru, the story shortly after takes a shift into finding the replacement Hokage for the village. As we all know, Tsunade is introduced into the story and shortly after becomes the 5th Hokage, and shortly after this, we move into Shippuden. This gives us the introduction to characters like Sai, Yamato, and more importantly for this discussion, Danzo. All of these characters are part of the Anbu/Root, which are concepts that at least were conceptualized in part 1 of the series, but it seems clear that Kishimoto didn't know what he wanted to do with this plot line until much later in the writing process, because Danzo is shown as an overbearing, manipulative, power-hungry character who's not only been working in the shadows and conspiring against the main cast, but we also learn later on that this character has been a part of Konoha's history for a long time. He was there and didn't do anything during Orochimaru's attack, seemingly because he wanted Hiruzen to die. So why then wouldn't he step up to the plate once the third's death was announced? Even later in the series, we're shown a flashback of the second Hokage's death, and how Hiruzen was named the third. And in that flashback, Danzo is right there. He has always been by Hiruzen's side in one way, shape, or form, and he would have quickly known of his death as the news would have traveled through the village like wildfire. So why not step up? Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I have parsed through all the evidence, and the conclusion I have come up with is The same as the beginning of this segment, unfortunately. Kishimoto simply didn't know what he wanted of these characters yet, or simply hadn't thought of it all yet, and didn't realize the ramifications of what he was writing. It doesn't break the story or anything, just makes you scratch your head because the idea of Danzo not trying to seize power the moment it's available is odd, to say the least. One of, if not the biggest plot point in Naruto is the fact that he has the nine-tailed fox sealed away inside of him. Time and time again, we watch as Naruto struggles to wrangle in the power of the nine-tails and how he has to rely on its power to pull him out of dangerous situations. As early as telling the fox to pay some rent all the way back in part 1 to help with his toad summoning and against his fight with Haku, for example, Naruto has been tapping into the power of the fox usually as a means of self-preservation. But why? Why does Kurama give Naruto anything at all? We learn much later in the series that a character named Rin had the three tails implanted inside of her and was going to be sent to the Leaf Village where the tail beast would have been forcibly unleashed, ending her life and likely the lives of many other villagers had that occurred, but she bravely sacrificed herself and in the process, the tailed beast died as well. However, years later, we learned that the tailed beast reformed and was confirmed to be inside the fourth Mizukage. This alone shows that the essence of the tailed beast being chakra prevents them from truly dying, and more than anything, just puts them on a cooldown system after taking fatal damage. But if this is the case, why did Kurama ever help Naruto? Sure, there is technically the possibility of Obito capturing him again in the future, so maybe he'd rather just bide his time and see how he can manipulate Naruto. But Kurama constantly talked about being locked away in his cage, being chained up, being confined, and with someone yearning for freedom that badly, I don't see why he wouldn't take the opportunity. The very first interaction on Tenchi Bridge would have sealed the deal. Naruto dies against Haku, Kurama is released, and then after a time reforms and is free once more. Again, there is the threat of the Akatsuki, but as we saw in the Third Great Ninja War, Kurama is a tactician, and as such, capturing it would be extremely difficult for anyone except Obito and maybe the combination of Itachi and Kasame. Also, we don't really know anything about the reforming process for the tailed beasts. It might be super painful or put them in a state of extreme vulnerability. Either way, if Kurama wanted free that badly, he had plenty of opportunities to do so, and should have really taken the many opportunities that he had when he had the chance. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button. Man, this entire video, I've just been stumbling. Make sure to hit the like button down below for me. Make sure you're subscribed. I really do appreciate it. We blasted past 1,000 subscribers and 1,500, so now we're just moving to 2,000, baby. Let's try to keep it moving. I appreciate you guys so much. And if you have any other video suggestions, let me know down in the comment section below. Thank you all so much, and I will see you all next time.